Patricia Sandoval is our next presenter. She will share her story of 3 abortions, work behind the scenes of Planned Parenthood, then nearly 3 years as a homeless drug addict. Patricia hosts a weekly TV program, Informe Pro Vida, on EWTN Espanol.
Hello, my name is Patricia Sandoval, international pro-life and chastity speaker, and it's such a privilege and an honor for me to share my story with all of you today. I'm very honored to be a part of this virtual event and just to talk about my story and the greatness of God's divine mercy in my life. The theme of this event is be who you're meant to be and you can set the world ablaze. That's one of my favorite quotes by Saint Catherine of Siena. But there's a great, issue because that quote is not for everyone, everyone specifically, because there are many human beings that don't have the chance to live, that don't have the chance to be who they were meant to be and to set the world ablaze because they were never born. And while my story begins when I was a child at home, I was very, very happy. My parents are from Mexico. They immigrated to the United States. I was born in California, and I felt very loved in my household. I was baptized into the Catholic faith, but the problem was that we never practiced our faith. As a family, we never prayed. We never went to Mass. I don't remember seeing a Bible in my home, and I didn't even know how to pray the rosary. I didn't know who God was up until I started going to my CCD classes. I was preparing for my first Holy Communion. And that's where I got to know the love of God. That's where I got to know who Jesus was and that he died for my sins and the sins of the world on the cross. And I got to know who Mother Mary, that was also my mother. And I felt a very close connection to God the Father. I felt very loved by him. I would come home after CCD class and run to my backyard and look up into the clouds and talk to God the Father. And I would feel his presence and I would feel his love. And I remember telling my mom one time, I really want to send God a love note, but how do I send that to heaven? And she bought me a balloon and put some helium inside the balloon. And we had, a ribbon tied to the balloon. And I wrote a love note to God. And I folded that little love note up, tied it on the ribbon, ran to my backyard and just watched that balloon fade away into the clouds. And I just felt that he received it. And after that, after I had received my first Holy Communion, it was probably the last time that I ever thought of God or spoken to him. I completely forgot about him after that. And my mom was heavily involved in the New Age era. So she would have all sorts of women come over to our home and do tarot card readings, palm readings. My mom had friends that basically did a lot of witchcraft. And my mom started just believing in everything but the Catholic faith. So the very little faith that we even had, that was hardly any, we were just completely far off into the New Age beliefs. And I believe that Satan was the king of our house and not Jesus. He was not the king of our family. He was not the king of our household. We opened the doors to evil. And this was the year 1992. And it was a pretty tough year for me. I was 12 years old. I was in the 6th grade. And that same year, I remember telling my mom that Planned Parenthood was going to come to my 6th grade class and give us a course on sexuality. And my mom thought this was amazing and this was great, that we were going to have a physician, a counselor, and a nurse come in and talk to us about birth control, talk to us about abortion and sexuality. Now, your parents can't give you something that they don't have. My mom didn't have the proper formation as a child. She didn't know what chastity was. She didn't know what virtue was. And obviously, I didn't know what that was either. My father never received that formation at home as a child in Mexico. See, it's different in the Latin American community. It's kind of a little bit more shameful to talk about sex. And some people even see it as sinful to talk to your children about sexuality. So my parents couldn't really give me any formation that they didn't have. I remember getting to school. the day of the course, and on my desk there was a banana, and there was a ton of condoms around this banana. Now, I want to remind everybody this was 1992. The internet did not exist then. So there was no YouTube that I could, investigate truth. I couldn't find any types of videos or testimonials. I didn't even know a pro-life movement existed. I was a 12-year-old who would go to the park, catch lizards. I would play with Barbie dolls. I would play just with the animals and my bicycle. I pretty much had a pure mindset up until this class. The counselor, the doctor, and the nurse started to talk about women's rights. And they started to talk about, experimenting with masturbation, that it was something healthy, it was something good for us. We prefer you young people to start experimenting with masturbation instead of, having sex so soon and having multiple partners, because there's all these STDs and, it can result in an unwanted pregnancy. But if you do start experimenting with a sexual partner, then, we can provide an abortion for you. We could provide these services, and it will be completely confidential. And I remember the physician telling us, ladies, it's your body, it's your choice. It's your right if you choose to have an abortion and terminate any pregnancy, and you can come to us, and we have your back. After that class, I pretty much thought that Planned Parenthood were heroes. I thought they had the youth backs. I thought, wow, they really care about our privacy and confidentiality. They offered to give us free birth control and condoms whenever we needed. And I had a different perspective about sexuality, and it was actually pretty much distorted. They spoke about safe sex, which doesn't exist, and I think it's a trap because they know it fails. And when safe sex fails, obviously there's an unwanted pregnancy, and this can result into having an abortion. And what I believe that they were doing is that they were seeking future abortion patients. And that's exactly what happened to me. I left that class and I thought, the day that I fall in love and have a boyfriend and practice safe sex, well, anything happens, anything I need, I can go to Planned Parenthood. They never spoke about the heart. They never spoke about chastity or human dignity, or just even your own dignity as a girl and as a young boy, and the consequences of having sex out of marriage. They just basically showed you how to protect your genital areas, promoting this false education, safe sex. And that year, like I said, was a very tough year. My parents, their marriage wasn't doing very well. And one day my mom decided to leave and go back to her country, Mexico. And when my mother left, I have an older sister and a younger brother. It was three of us. We were pretty much angry. We were very hurt. I became very rebellious as a young child. And growing up with my father, practically all my life, I was a rebellious teen. And usually when there's a teenager that's rebellious, it's because there's anger and there's wounds. And most of those wounds have to do with the abandonment or, the hurt of a parent. And I was pretty much wounded and angry. But I was a young girl that was pretty much vain and worldly. I didn't have virtue, like I mentioned earlier. I basically just wanted to be successful. I wanted to be rich. I wanted to be famous. I wanted to be somebody in life. I wanted to travel the world. So I made sure that I had straight A's in school. But I had to be the prettiest girl in school. I had to be the girl that had the best clothes, the nicest cars. And that was pretty much what I had in my heart. It was all vain and self-glory and just, trying to make it in the world. When I was 19 years old, I was still a virgin. And I remember my group of friends laughing at me, and they're kind of bullying me around saying, wow, you're the only virgin out of all our girlfriends, and you're dating this guy that's older than you. He's 25 years old. He's already sexually experienced. And if you love your boyfriend, well, why don't you give yourself to your boyfriend? You've already dated him for 6 months. And I think it's time to show him that you love him. And that's what we thought true love was. We thought that true love was giving your heart and giving your body. And that's kind of what girlfriends and boyfriends do. I didn't really think about any type of consequences. I just wanted to show my boyfriend that I really cared and loved him and that he was deserving of my virginity. And I started to practice safe sex with my boyfriend. We started to use the condom. And this is what I learned in school. I remember that the sexual education course that I had, and they actually showed us how to apply the condom on those bananas that we had on our desks. So we started to use a condom thinking that we were protecting ourselves and we were being responsible. But 6 months after initiating, intimacy together, I didn't feel so good one day. I felt very sick and I noticed that my menstrual cycle was not coming. So I decided to buy a pregnancy test, but I doubted that I was pregnant. There's no way. I'm practicing safe sex. we're protecting ourselves, and there's no way I can be pregnant. And that's not gonna happen to me, right? We always think it's not gonna happen to us. That happens to other people, but that's not gonna happen to me. And to my shock, that pregnancy test came out positive immediately. And it wasn't fear that I felt. It was more than fear. It was panic. I mean, the moment I saw that test was positive, I thought to myself, my life is completely over. This is not success at all. This is failure. This is not what I wanted for my life. I wanted to travel. I wanted to be successful. I'm a straight A student in college. My father's a Hispanic, Mexican, macho man, and I was just imagining my dad's mustache just trembling out of anger and kicking me out of the house, and all these scary thoughts came into my head and my heart. But when I called my boyfriend to tell him the news about my pregnancy, he was so excited. I will never forget his words, because his manly words, it eased my heart. All that fear came out of my heart when he said, "Do not worry. I will be responsible for you. You will be okay. I'm going to take you under my wing. You don't have to worry about anything. I will support you, and I will support this baby, right? This future baby." Because I truly didn't believe that it was a baby until you were 5 months gestation. That's exactly what I learned in the 6th grade. They said there was no life until a woman was 5 months pregnant, and before then, it's just a sac of tissue, a clump of cells. So he encouraged me to continue the pregnancy, that he was going to take care of me. And this gave me courage to say, yes, you know what? I'm not alone. I'm being supported. I'm going to continue. I'm going to continue this with my boyfriend. I love him so much. I remember we went to our first doctor's appointment, and that's when they did the first ultrasound. I remember hearing a heartbeat. I remember looking at the screen. And when I saw that screen, I saw life forming. I saw a head. I saw little limbs, like little arms moving around. And I felt so happy. And I felt like there was something so special growing inside of my womb. And I was protecting what was growing inside of me. And my boyfriend was extremely happy. And a couple months passed by. I was already 4 months pregnant. And one day, my friends, this same group of friends that I mentioned earlier, that encouraged me to have sex and to give myself to my boyfriend. Well, these same friends came over to my house and they were crying. And they said, "Patricia, this is the worst mistake of your life. You're not ready to be a mother. You're a straight A student. You have so much going for you. The best solution to this problem, the best thing that you can do is have an abortion. It's not the time. There will be a day where you'll get married and you'll have a family, and now is not the time." And they were weeping. And all of a sudden, again, that fear came into my heart. And I thought to myself, what am I doing? They're right. It isn't the right time. I have so much going for me. I want to travel the world. I want to have a successful career. I do want to get married. I don't want to shame my father and shame him in front of my whole family. I don't want to do this to him either. It's not the time to be a mother. Not knowing that I was already a mother. I thought that I was not a mother yet. Now, are my friends evil? Did they mean, horrible things for me by recommending an abortion? Of course not. They thought that they were giving me the best advice that they knew. What happened was that we were just a group of ignorant young girls that had a distorted formation, education as young children. And I thought that they were giving me the best advice also. And I said, yes, this, having an abortion is the solution to this problem. And now this was a problem that I needed to get rid of. I made my appointment at an abortion clinic near my home. It was a 9:00 appointment. I had the first appointment. And I remember getting out of my car, and all of a sudden, I felt so much shame walking up into this building. I never imagined that I would get pregnant, and I never imagined that I would be a woman, about to walk into this abortion clinic building and have an abortion. I never thought that would happen to me. And I remember telling myself, I'm not going to look at anybody. I'm going to look down and I'm just going to get this over with and never think about this again. And of course, I didn't tell my boyfriend the truth at the time. What I was planning to do was get my abortion, and after my abortion, tell him I had a miscarriage. So I walk into this abortion clinic and I'm looking down, and most women do. Most women, they're crying, they're scared, and they're just feeling so much shame. And like I had mentioned, I couldn't go on YouTube to see what an abortion was. I had no idea what an abortion was because the internet didn't exist, and they didn't give me any type of information on the phone when I made my appointment. They just told me to come in. And when I walked into the lobby, I was shocked to see that there were so many teenagers inside that lobby. And I'm talking about 13, 14, 15-year-olds. I was probably the oldest teenager there. I was already an adult. I was 19 years old. And I remember telling the receptionist, why are all these kids here today? It's Tuesday morning. They should be in school. Why are they here? They shouldn't be here. And she said, no, yes. Here in California, if a young 13-year-old is pregnant and she wants to have an abortion, she has the right to do so, to cut school and to have an abortion procedure without their parents' consent. And this was pretty shocking to me, because you're not talking about women having abortions anymore. You're talking about kids having abortions. You're talking about young kids. A 13-year-old is not a woman yet. And this was very shocking to me. And they took me into the operation room. And I remember I was shaking. I was sitting on the operation bed, on the procedure bed. And the doctor walks in, and she looked like a very well put together, very, very nice doctor. She came in and she saw that I was nervous. She said, Patricia, don't even be nervous. This is only going to take 5 minutes. Look, if this makes you feel any better, I've had an abortion myself. And last year I performed 2 abortions on my daughter. My daughter's okay. I'm okay. You're going to be okay. This is the solution to your problem. This is your nightmare is going to be over in 5 minutes. Now, at the time I was working in the medical field as a receptionist, I was working for 6 positions. And at work, I was always told to have compassionate, behavior on patients, to be honest, and that patient care is number 1. So I trust doctors immensely. I respected doctors, working for so many. And I trusted her. And, why would this doctor want to harm me? And why would she want to harm her own daughter? And she had an abortion herself. And her words did put me at ease. And I told myself, all right, you know what? 5 minutes is nothing. I can close my eyes and I can just block my emotions. I can lay stiff and just survive 5 minutes during this abortion. And that's exactly what I did. I just laid there stiff. I closed my eyes. I didn't cry. I tried not to express any emotion. It was scary to hear a vacuum sound because it's pretty loud. But at the same time, after the abortion, I felt relieved. I thought that my problems were over. I thought, you know what? I could continue being the same woman I was before I was pregnant. The doctor told me that the only thing I was going to feel after the abortion was some cramping and some spotting, but that I can start my work and, just have normal activities after. But she lied to me. She never told me the truth about post-abortion syndrome. She never told me that my real problems were going to start after that abortion. I was sent home with some Tylenol and a big bag of condoms and birth control so I can continue practicing safe sex. And I remember getting home that day, but there were guilty and shameful feelings in my heart. And I didn't feel well. I called my boyfriend. I gave him the news that I didn't feel well and that I had a miscarriage, and he was weeping. He was weeping, and he was so sorrowful for the loss of the pregnancy. And I told him, you know what? Don't even cry. Don't even feel sad. It wasn't anything. It was just a clump of cells. But after that, things started to change within me. I started to feel great depression, great anxiety. I remember I would see children publicly in the streets, and I felt traumatized when I would see them. I would feel so guilty. I couldn't even look at a child. My boyfriend would call me and tell me he was having nightmares, and I would ask him, what kind of nightmares are you having? And he's like, well, I'm having reoccurring nightmares. I keep dreaming of a little girl that calls me daddy, daddy. And I felt like a sense of emptiness, like there was something missing, and anxiety. And I remember looking in the mirror and just not liking the person that was on the other side of that mirror, the reflection of that person I was looking at. I felt disgusted when I look at myself. I noticed that my self-esteem was really bad. And I just didn't know what was going on. I thought that maybe it was just because my family was, separated and my parents had gone through a divorce, and I was just very upset. But I didn't know that I was suffering post-abortion syndrome, and that my boyfriend was also suffering post-abortion syndrome. He would tell me that he would feel sad, that there was something missing, and he felt depressed. And, we had these emotions, and we just didn't connect, or he didn't even know, that he had an abortion, but I just didn't connect any of this to the abortion. Well, we continued practicing safe sex. I started to use a birth control pill, thinking, again, I was being responsible, taking my pill every day at the same time. And something didn't feel right months after. Again, I started to feel very sick, very nauseous, and my menstrual cycle was not coming. And when I took that second pregnancy test, again, it came out positive. And I thought to myself, what's going on? Like, pregnant again for the second time? 2 pregnancies in 6 months. What's going on? I'm being responsible. I'm practicing safe sex. All right, well, I'm only a month into this pregnancy. It's literally a sack of tissue. It's nothing. So I'm not even going to tell anybody about this. I'm not going to tell my friends. I'm not going to tell my boyfriend. He's not going to want to have an abortion. So I'm just going to go to a different abortion clinic. I can't go to the same one I just went to. They're going to think that I'm stupid and that I just didn't, that I didn't learn my lesson. So I'm just going to go to Planned Parenthood this time. They have a good reputation. They've got my back. They're amazing. So I'm gonna go make an appointment with them. I made my appointment with Planned Parenthood. And during that abortion, I told myself the same thing. I'm not going to cry. I'm going to lay here stiff. And I'm just going to block all emotions and get through 5 minutes. Well, during that abortion, I heard clapping, and it was a doctor, the abortionist, that was clapping. And she said that she was amazed how brave I was during this abortion, that I didn't cry, I didn't faint. I was making her job easy because I wasn't kicking, that most women are dramatic, they're crying, they're kicking, and that I was just completely courageous. I was sent into this recovery room, given some cookies and tea, and I was basically applauded by the whole staff. And they told me that I did an amazing job during my abortion. When I left the abortion clinic, Planned Parenthood, they gave me a bag of condoms and a bag of birth control so I can continue practicing safe sex. They told me that the only symptom that I will have after that abortion was cramping and bleeding. But they too lied to me. And they lied to me once again, because they lied to me when I was 12 years old in the 6th grade. But now I was a victim again of Planned Parenthood, and they lied to me after this abortion. They didn't tell me about post-abortion syndrome. And after the second abortion, just things got worse. Things were intense. The anxiety was unbearable. I started to pull my hair out. I had this trauma called Trichotillomania. My self-esteem was just on the floor. I would have nightmares of children crying. I couldn't see children. And I just felt so empty inside. I was even pretty much suicidal. I had suicidal thoughts. I would contemplate how I'd kill myself. And my boyfriend started to feel very depressed, very sad, and he didn't know what was going on. Our relationship was getting worse. We'd fight all the time. I'd get irritated by him. And I actually couldn't even stand him. I mean, he would come around and try to hug me, be lovable, and I couldn't bear it. Things were just pretty much going downhill at this point. But I didn't connect all these emotions, all this interior suffering to the abortion, to the second abortion that I had. And I continued dating my boyfriend. We continued practicing safe sex. I had already failed twice. And months later, again, I started to feel very sick, nauseous, and I said to myself, there's no way I am pregnant. There's no way. I'm doing everything that they tell me at the clinics. I'm practicing, being responsible and protecting myself. What's going on? Well, this was a trap that I was telling you about. Once a woman has an abortion, she's going to go back into the same lifestyle. She's going to, go back into being promiscuous and having sex and not practicing the virtue of chastity or abstinence. She's just going to go back to that same lifestyle. And the same thing is going to occur because what society does now and day is that they separate sexual pleasure, having sex, with having babies. Well, the reality is, sexuality is so beautiful and so sacred. It was created for marriage. That the fruit of sexual relations is having a baby. You cannot separate them. So this time, I decided just to tell my boyfriend the truth and tell him I was pregnant and tell him that I was just having an abortion. I called him, told him I had an appointment to have an abortion, that I was pregnant. And he was very, very excited. And he said, no, Patricia, I'm going to support you. Don't worry. And I said, no, I'm going to have an abortion. It's not time to have a baby. I've got so many goals and dreams for myself. And this is just a burden. And then he said, but I don't want to have an abortion. I want to be a father. And when he said that, I was so angry at him. I yelled at him and said, who are you to take my right away from me? It's my right and my body. I don't care what you do. I'm going to go have an abortion. If you want to come along, great. If you don't, I don't care, because it's not your right to tell me what to do over my body. And now that I reflect on our relationship and on that day, it was his right. He was the father of that child. It takes two to have a baby. It takes two to tango. And what I did was I took his right away from him. I took his paternity away from him. What's really sad today is that in most circumstances, the unborn children don't have a voice. They can't defend themselves. But if a man wants to save the life of his child, he doesn't have a right. He doesn't have a voice. He doesn't have a say in it. I've met many men after my conferences come up to me and say, Patricia, I stood in front of that abortion clinic. I tried to save the life of my child, and I was thrown out by security. I was thrown out by police officers, and I begged my girlfriend, please don't kill my child. And I just couldn't do anything to save that baby's life, my baby's life. I didn't have a voice. And that's the scenario today. Those are the laws that we have today in our country and in most parts of the world. If a man wants to save his child, he's completely powerless. And, it's not a coincidence that we're living in the year of St. Joseph, which is a tremendous blessing. And I just want to tell the men that are watching this testimony that men should step it up. You men were created for greatness. You men were created from the beginning to be the protectors of life, to protect the wife, to protect the children, and to be courageous, just like St. Joseph. And this also applies to protecting, your sisters and your sisters that are in your community. Those are your sisters in Christ as well, to protect their purity, to protect their souls from danger, and to really defend life. Sadly, like I said, I took that right away from my boyfriend, He went to the abortion clinic. I think he was just scared that I would leave him or, dump him, how teenagers say. And he was there, and I know he didn't want to be there. He was standing right next to me as I was laying on the procedure table. I remember once the vacuum sound was heard, it was a loud sound, he started to squeeze my hand because it was scary. And I wanted to block myself. I wanted to close my eyes and just get it over with. But I decided to look up at my boyfriend and to see his reaction, because he was squeezing my hand so hard, and I knew he was scared. When I looked into his eyes, they were just full of tears. Those were the longest 5 minutes of my life. The whole time during that abortion, I felt just his tears bathing my face. Every tear that rolled down my face and rolled down my neck, I started to feel guilty. And I thought to myself, he's thinking that it's the first abortion. I lied to him. It's the third abortion in a year and a half. How did I get pregnant 3 times? And how did I get to an abortion clinic 3 times in a year and a half? I just never thought that I would be that girl. And I started to feel horrible during that abortion. I just wanted to get it over with. And I knew that I would leave him after that third abortion. Like I had mentioned, I was pretty much suicidal after the second abortion. I was a mess. And after this third abortion, I was a disaster. I was miserable. I left him. I broke up with him, and he was devastated. He was also, suffering depression and feeling, a lot of anxiety, and we were just dysfunctional. We couldn't even function in a relationship. I just wanted to move away and start over. I felt that, walking in my hometown, everybody that walked in my presence or walked past me, I felt like they all knew that I had had an abortion. It was just this horrible feeling. And I thought, if I go somewhere where I can start all over and nobody knows me, I can be happy. Well, the misery was inside here. And the misery was wherever, the misery was not going to go anywhere if I moved location. So I basically just moved to, location, and all misery followed. I moved to Sacramento, California. And it was the first time that I lived on my own. I've always lived with my father. I needed a job. And I've always, like I mentioned, worked in the medical field. I remember in the newspaper, they had a classified ad, and these big black bold letters: Planned Parenthood urgently seeking a back office nurse who is bilingual in English and in Spanish. And I was like, wow, there's a job opening in Planned Parenthood. I'm bilingual. I'm fluent in both languages, but I'm not a nurse. Maybe I can call them and offer maybe to file charts or translate. I can offer, my bilingual services to them and see if they have anything for me. Well, I had an interview with them, an appointment. I went to this interview, and when I told the manager that I was post-abortive, that I had multiple abortions, and that I was fluent in both languages, she was just the happiest lady. She said, "We urgently need somebody like you." 90% of the abortions that we perform here are Hispanic women that come from Latin America and that they don't speak any English. When she told me this was pretty shocking to me, because my dad comes from a family of 14 brothers and sisters, and my mom comes from a family of 12. And most families from their generation have big families, have a lot of children. And, I just didn't think that Hispanic people, had abortions. I was pretty ignorant. But of course, we all know that abortion is targeted towards minorities. And she said, you didn't go to nursing school. You don't have the credentials. But I'm going to give you the job as a nurse. I'm going to give you the job, and we're going to train you on the spot. Now that I reflect on this is so illegally dangerous. Of course, that day I was super happy because I went in there as a receptionist, trying to seek a receptionist job, and I walked out as a nurse. Okay, so I was given this job with no credentials. I started on a Monday. It was my first day at Planned Parenthood. I was so happy to work for such an amazing organization, that was all over the US and all over the world. And I thought that I could grow an opportunity at Planned Parenthood. That's what they told me. When I went into the office, the manager was already waiting for me, and she takes me by the hand, takes me into her office, closes the door, and very bluntly, very cold, told me, all right, today you're going to prepare 50 young girls for their abortions. We usually do 25 abortions on Wednesdays, 25 on Fridays. Most of them speak Spanish. Now, Patricia, you're going to do everything in your will to convince these girls to make it to their appointment. If these girls don't show up to get an abortion, your job is on the line. So that means you will never, ever use the word baby during consultation. You will never use the word mother, father, he, she. You can't even use the word fetus, because even the word fetus gives human dignity. I don't care what you call it. You refer to it as an it, a clump of cells, a sac of tissue. Do you understand? And I didn't understand. I was confused because she was training me how to change my vocabulary during these consultations. The most important thing on consultation day is you never let a woman see her ultrasound screen. Never let her hear anything during the ultrasound. The screen needs to face the doctor or, one of the other back office nurses, which were also nurses that were hired without credentials or fake nurses, basically. This is very, very important, Patricia. If she cries, if she wants to look at the screen, that screen is to face the physician and away from the patient. Do you understand? And this is just so odd to me. I didn't understand. And she said, you can't bring any type of photograph of your family members, of your cousins or your nieces and your nephews, because if you have a photograph in your office and a young girl walks in, sees a picture of a family, she can get traumatized and she can walk out and we lose that abortion. Well, this was all kind of weird to me, but I did as she told me. I counseled these young girls, thinking that I was truly helping them. I would see these young girls that were 13 years old, 14 years old, and I would look at them and, and I would tell them, this is the best decision for your life. You're going to bring a child to suffer into this world. You're going to suffer. This is going to be a burden. You're only 13 years old. You're not ready. And I really thought I was helping them. But when Wednesday came along, and then Wednesday was abortion day, that's where I saw the truth of Planned Parenthood. I walked in and into work. The manager was waiting for me in her office. She closes the door of her office and, again, very cold, very blunt, very heartless, starts to give me instructions. The first thing she said was, you will never tell a soul what you see behind the doors of this Planned Parenthood clinic. Today you will be on your feet because every abortion can only last 5 minutes because time is money. So there are 2 procedure rooms. You will be assisting the abortionist and you will be assisting the patients. Now, you don't know the abortionist yet. I haven't introduced you to him because, usually we get abortionists that just kind of jump around abortion clinics in different states. He's not permanently from this clinic. Women die during abortions, Patricia, and they have great complications. So if, a woman dies during her abortion and her family members try to sue, the abortionist is not from this office, and we just don't have all this chaos and in conflict. So we just get abortionists that just travel from different states and cities and perform abortions. Now, you will never, ever tell the mothers, and she used the word mothers. Okay, when you use the word mother, it's because there's a child. You will never tell the fathers that are in the waiting room that after each abortion, we throw their baby away in the garbage. She said this so direct and heartless, and it was something that pierced my heart. It was something that was very scary when she said, and it extremely confused and scared to even ask, what are you talking about? I just stayed quiet. I want to remind you guys that I was told that I would be trained on the spot to assist during abortions, but I had no training. I was basically thrown into an abortion procedure on the third day of my job. I took the first patient and she was 15 years old. She was 3 months pregnant. I remember this young girl was sweating. She was totally scared and she wanted to faint. I had trouble putting her on the procedure table. And I remember, just thinking, wow, this girl is being dramatic over a sack of tissue. I was pretty much irritated by her, and the abortionist comes in and he tells me we have 5 minutes, literally. He said, stand behind me. I'm going to sit in my stool and I'm going to start the procedure and you need to stand behind me to assist me. Like I said, I had no nursing credentials. I had no idea what I was doing. And this is so dangerous. There was a little table, it's called a Mayo stand, right next to his stool. And there was a sheet on it. And he takes the sheet off. And this is the first time I saw. Because during my 3 abortions, like I mentioned, I blocked myself. I didn't want to see anything. I, would lay there stiff. I'd close my eyes. But this is the first time I saw. And I saw a lot of sharp instruments that were very scary. I saw things that looked like sharp scissors. I saw blades. I saw curettes. I saw a big needle, a big, a medication. I saw anesthesia with a big needle on it. And it just didn't look good. I remember standing behind his shoulder and he says, okay, I'm going to anesthetize her womb, 7 injections into the womb so she doesn't feel anything. And he anesthetized her. And then he takes out the cannula, which is the tip of the abortion machine. It's the vacuum machine, the suction machine. It's called a cannula, and it's like this long metal thin tube. And literally the tip of it, when I saw it, was sharp, like a little blade. And he said, we're going to start the abortion. So he turns on the vacuum machine. From what I know is that this vacuum, the suction machine, is 28 times stronger than a household vacuum machine. And he starts the abortion. Standing behind the physician and watching this abortion was probably one of the most violent acts I've ever seen in my life. Once he's inside with this sharp object, he needs to make sure that everything is out. So he can't stop. And this young girl started to kick. I mean, her legs were flying off the table. And what he was doing with this knife, with this like little blade in the suction machine, he was dodging her legs and moving to the side and just trying to make sure that he's getting everything. But then something dawned on me as I'm watching the scene. Wait a minute. How does he know he has everything? He cannot see. How does he know he's not perforating her womb, damaging, her fallopian tubes, damaging, the inside? Well, he doesn't know, because abortion is a blind man's surgery. It's kind of like a guessing surgery, and this is so dangerous. This is why so many women have complications of infertility. They hemorrhage. There's been cases where women have had their rectum perforated. This is so dangerous, but women are so desperate to get rid of this pregnancy, and they submit themselves to this violence. And and other women, and this is something that I've reflected on, other women didn't even know what they were getting themselves into because they didn't even speak the language. These women that only spoke Spanish signed a consent form that was not translated into their language, and they didn't know that they could die during this procedure. Because the consent form, I remember when I signed my consent forms, it says you can die during this procedure and your family members cannot sue us. This is so dangerous because it is an abortionist doing an abortion with his eyes completely shut closed. And so, like I mentioned, it's kind of like a guessing thing. So he looks at his watch and says, okay, it's been about 5 minutes. I think I'm done. He thinks he's done. When have you ever heard a surgeon during surgery tell his staff, you guys, let's close the incision because I think I'm done. I'm not sure, but I think I'm done. No, it's not professional. This is not safe. That's why legal abortion, that whole myth, is never, ever safe. And he turns off this machine. I remember that on top of the machine, there was like this glass cylinder and there's, an amount of blood there. And he says, okay, I got a good amount of blood. He opens this cylinder and all the contents fall into a bag. I grab the bag, I tie the bag up, and there's another fake nurse, an employee that's waiting for me. And she says, come with me. So she takes me into this back hidden room in Planned Parenthood. And she says, after each abortion, this door must be shut. Because if anybody walks by, any patient sees what we're about to see, then we're in big trouble. Then we can get sued. Everything was so confusing to me. How they were training me. It was just so confusing to me. I didn't understand. In front of me, there was this big Petri dish. It was a glass dish. And she said, all right, untie the bag and throw the contents into that Petri dish. And that's exactly what I did. When I threw the contents into this Petri dish, the first thing that occurred was the stench. It was a stench. Abortion has a smell. I had never in my life smelt this before, and I have never smelt it since. It was a smell of death. I remember I wanted to faint because it was so powerful and it was strong. I look at my coworker and there's no expression on her face. I wanted to see if she was had nausea, or if she wanted to faint, or if she was smelling what I was smelling. And I noticed that most of my coworkers, they're pretty much working like zombies. I think they had to work that way to even survive working in such an industry because they are affected by abortion. I asked her, okay, so we're going to look for the sac of tissue. And she takes out these tweezer-looking instruments. They're called forceps. And she starts to dig into this dish. And to my surprise, she holds up to the light a little hand, an arm with a little hand that was extended. And she said, we need 5 parts of the baby to let the abortionist know that the abortion was successful. This was so shocking to me. I contemplated that hand. And the first thing that I saw in that little hand were the fingerprints. And that's where I said, wait a minute. Nobody in the world has my fingerprint. That's what makes me authentic, irrepeatable. It makes me human. It makes me worthy. This little hand has a fingerprint. I remember she laid this little arm and this little hand on top of the counter, and she found the second part. The third part was a little leg with a little foot, completely formed. Footprints, toenails that were forming. I even remember on the skin, little hairs. This is part number 3. She found the 4th part. But the 5th and last part was the part that broke my heart. It was the head. This baby had eyes that were formed, little nose, ears. I even saw little hairs on the head. But this baby's mouth was wide open because this baby was screaming to live. This baby was screaming and trying to fight for his life. But there was nobody there to hear him or her, and there was nobody there to defend this baby. And this baby died in anguish. This face, the expression on this face was of anguish and pain. This baby felt every second of that abortion because that anesthesia was not for the baby. This anesthesia was for this baby's mother. And she puzzled this human body back together. And she said the abortion was successful. The patient can go home. And I remember her grabbing this body that was in pieces and just dumping it into a trash can. This was so horrifying for me because I saw truth. I saw my truth. I was lied to. I was deceived. I didn't abort 3 sacks of tissues. This is a baby that I just saw. I aborted 3 of my own children. I was so horrified by this. I couldn't even talk. I just stay silent. And I don't even know how I survived the day, but I went through the day assisting the abortionist, assisting these young girls. And let me tell you, abortion is not something women really want, because these women would cry, they would faint. I remember employees dragging them down the hall. I mean, there's blood everywhere. This is a building where it's a complete Holocaust inside. It is a nightmare. It is one step before going to hell. I don't think there's anything on this planet that a human being can witness so horrifying than to witness what goes on behind the doors in an abortion clinic. There can't be anything worse than that you can see. I remember at the end of the day, this trash can that was full of baby pieces and body parts. And now that I reflect on this image, I think to myself, why? Because people don't know what chastity and purity is. And these babies are the ones who pay the price for all the sexual disorder. Well, after I worked at Planned Parenthood, I only lasted there a month. I got into heavy drugs. I got into cocaine addiction. I got into methamphetamine addiction. And I just lost myself, and I lost everything that I had. I never, ever met those goals and dreams that I wanted to have. The abortions literally destroyed my life, and working in Planned Parenthood completely destroyed my life. And it was one day that I was, on the street, and it was 3 years of just living as a homeless bum with no hope, and just devastated over what had happened to me in my life. And I remembered when I was a child that I once knew who God was, and that I sent him a love note into heaven, and that I felt his love. And that was the day that I cried out to God, and I told him that I was just so sorry and for all the things that I've done in my life. And I asked for his forgiveness. Well, minutes later, this young girl ran out of a restaurant, and she held me into her arms, and she said, "Jesus loves you. I saw you crying on the street, and I prayed for you, and God gave me a message to tell you that he loves you, and that everything that you've done in your life, he forgives you." Well, she brought me back home after so many years of being lost, and my mom had moved back to the States. And thanks be to God for my mother's prayers, she came back to the Catholic Church, and all the years I was missing on the streets, she prayed for my salvation. Thank God for his divine mercy, and thank God for my mother's prayers that I am alive today and that I'm on the right path to heaven. Well, thanks to my mom, I went to confession, I went to daily mass, but I couldn't forgive my abortions. It was something that I just couldn't get over. I saw where my children ended up. They no longer lived, they died. And it was when I went to a Rachel's Vineyard retreat to heal my abortions that God let me see my 3 children during prayer. I closed my eyes and I saw a girl, a boy, and a young girl. During this prayer, I had a vision, and they told me that they loved me, and that they loved me, and they were praying for me. And it was when I could forgive myself. I accepted God's mercy that weekend, but I actually got to see the divine mercy that my children had for me, that they forgave me. And that's why I decided to defend life. I decided that weekend to repair all the damage that I've done, to give dignity to my 3 children that were aborted. And if one life can be saved through this story, then everything was worth it. We must remember one thing, that we as Catholics, we have the obligation to defend life. I'm not the only pro-lifer here. All of you are called to defend life. And when one baby is aborted, it's not just one life that's aborted. It's a generation that's aborted through that one life. We haven't had 66 million abortions in the US. We've had 66 million generations aborted. I want to encourage everybody here and let you guys know that this is one of the most important ministries that we have today. It's one of the biggest attacks that Satan has. It's against the unborn. So if we're called to be what we're meant to be, we could set the world ablaze, and we can abolish abortion one day. You are in my prayers, and I ask that you please pray for me and my family to continue this pro-life ministry. God bless you, and thanks again for letting me be a part of this amazing event. God bless you.